Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good Tuesday. We're going to go ahead and get started with the webinar. Again, welcome to the California Funders for Boys and Men of Color co-hosted Funder Policy Update webinar with our partners, the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. We're very excited to be able to share the work and the victories of the Alliance and really understand what's coming up next when we talk about policies that are really focused in on boys and men of color, and what we can do to help support the work, and also how Foundation can be able to take part and also support the work, not just with our resources, but also with our voices, and thinking about how we support our partners in the community doing this work. So I want to, start out by introducing myself. My name is Sergio Cuellar. I'm the program manager here at the Sierra Health Foundation and the Center, and I manage the day-to-day of the California Funders for Boys and Men of Color. Also in the room, I have my team from the Center and Sierra Health Foundation, so I'll go ahead and allow folks to introduce themselves.
Good morning, all. This is Matt Cervantes, serve as the Director of Health Programs for Sierra Health Foundation and the Center.
Good morning, everybody. Ray Green, my brother's keeper, Sacramento coordinator. Excited to be on the call.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Casey Ann Carbonell. I'm a program associate here at Sierra Health Foundation and the Center.
Great. So I'll turn it over also to Mark, and if you can introduce yourself and also your team for PolicyLink.
Great. Hello, everyone. Mark Philpart with PolicyLink and the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. And I believe we're joined by my colleague, Sybil.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Sybil Grant with PolicyLink and Alliance for Boys and Men of Color.
Sergio,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
So I was just going to see if we could go ahead and do a quick introduction for folks in the room. If we can start out with any folks that are currently in Northern California, that would be great. And I know it's going to be a science to try to, an art to get, not talk over each other. So let's see if we can do this as best as possible. Can we start, actually, I'm just going to go with folks that I see on screen. So can we start with Kat Brooks?
Hi, good morning. My name is Kat Brooks. Excuse me. I'm the Executive Director of the Justice Teams Network and the co-founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project.
Great. So we'll start. Any other folks that are in Northern California?
This is Ken Spence with Next Gen Policy Center.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Welcome. Other folks in Northern California?
Hey, Richard Thomason, Policy Director, Blue Shield of California Foundation.
Welcome.
This is Carolina Ramirez, Research and Data Analyst with Education Trust West, and
as well as Anthony Chavez.
Okay, Carolina, you're a little bit, sound a little bit distant. So I don't know if you can say that again.
With Education Trust West.
Thank you. Welcome. Other folks from Northern California? Great. So let's see if there's any folks from Southern California. We're going to start with, I see Liberty Hills on.
This is Amy Fliger, Senior Manager, Foundation Relations for Liberty Hill.
This is Dr. Akin Abioye, Program Manager, Youth Justice with Liberty Hill.
Great. I see folks from Brothers Sun Selves.
Hey, what's going on? This is David Turner, Brothers Sun Selves Coalition.
Miguel Dominguez with Community Coalition.
Great, welcome. Other folks from Southern California.
Hey, everybody, this is Johnny from My Girls in Action. We're also a part of the Brothers Sun Selves Coalition.
Great. Teresa, I see you're trying to introduce yourself. Let me see if I can unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Teresa Smith, founder of Lean Law Enforcement Accountability Network and co-founder of the Stop Coalition, which is a coalition of impacted family members.
Welcome. Other folks from Southern California.
I'm not sure if you can hear me, but it's Jim Harrison.
You're a bit muffled, and I have all I see on your screen is Jay Her.
Jim Herr from the Annenberg Foundation.
Welcome, Jim. And then any folks in the Central Valley? Any folks that we've missed that haven't had an opportunity to introduce themselves? Okay, so great. So we're going to go ahead and start with the webinar, and we wanted to be able to again, welcome everybody to this webinar to understand and learn about the work that's been happening on the policy front in the name of Boys and Men of Color, through the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, our partners who we've been really glad to be partnering with. We have a quick kind of presentation that I will be kind of just talking about briefly around what CFBMoC is doing, but then also we'll turn this over to our partners at the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color to really talk about the work they've done over the past year, what they see coming up in the upcoming session, and how, again, we can be supportive of their work in the work that we do here with Foundations. So we'll go ahead and get started. So briefly, just for folks that aren't aware of the work of the California Funders for Boys and Men of Color, we launched in 2014, really at the time that the Obama administration was rolling out their My Brother's Keeper initiative across the country. At that time, our foundation CEOs were in the room and also started thinking how California can be a model of what it looked like to work in the space around boys and men of color, knowing that we had a history already of doing this work from community groups. What would it look like for foundations to actually bring their resources together to really support this work and to make sure that we are deeply doing systems and policy shifts to make sure that we are breaking down barriers for boys and men of color. To this day, we have 15 committed foundations statewide that are, again, bringing their resources and the voices of their CEOs to the table to really support work in 3 regions across California and as well across the state. And really critical to this work is, looking at how we support policy work, and we have been partnering with the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color for the past 5 years to really support their work and, again, get communities engaged in the policy work to really shift and break down barriers for boys and men of color. So our vision is that all boys and men of color should enjoy full inclusion in all opportunities California has to offer, and as California's prosperity grows, we know that boys and men of color will flourish as well. Again, we talked about our PLACE strategy. We are currently funding work in 3 regions across the state, in Oakland, Bay Area, in Los Angeles County, and in Sacramento, San Joaquin. Each of those regions are tackling different issues. LA County is looking at transferring the largest probation system as they say it in the world, and looking to transfer that into a really comprehensive youth development system that's going to be the first in the nation. In the Oakland Bay Area, we've been focused in on working around workforce development for boys and men of color, working with community partners and talent development agencies to make sure that boys and men of color are job ready, but also working with community partners and corporations and employers in the region to make sure that they also understand how to work with boys and men of color, especially that are coming from many times traumatized and marginalized communities in the Bay Area. And in Sacramento and San Joaquin counties, we are working with community partners and systems leaders to really increase the opportunities and access to post-secondary opportunities for boys and men of color, making sure that we are getting boys and men of color to and through college by having them complete 4-year degree and certificate programs in the higher education space. Again, really looking to shift the way we do work with boys and men of color across the state in these spaces. As part of this work, we are also engaging in a narrative change campaign that we'll be releasing in early 2020. But this is really to kind of start changing the perception of boys and men of color across the state. Our Here to Lead campaign is going to really start to tackle, again, identifying that boys and men of color are currently leading in our spaces, in our communities, and they are redefining what civic engagement looks like for them. So we want to make sure that they're able to kind of be having light shined on their work, and again, really be present in this work that we're doing and at the forefront of all the work that we're trying to shift for boys and men of color. And again, that launch will be coming early in 2020. So finally, again, I want to just really reiterate, over the past 5 years, we formalized a partnership with the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. Since then, they've passed over 90 bills, and I'm sure that's increased, and that support breaking barriers for boys and men of color. It's been a great partnership. One, to see Mark and his team do this work with community partners and empower community partners to be at the forefront of legislative and policy victories. We see that as a vital part of our work to be able to support that, and are excited to kind of hear the reflection of the last year's work and thinking about what's next on the horizon for 2020 and how we all can be supportive as a philanthropic community to support their work in many ways that they need us to as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark. Mark, I have the slides set up here currently, so if you want to just go ahead and let me know when you'd like me to shift, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you, Sergio, and thank you to CFBMoC for your tremendous leadership. This partnership has really been a powerful one, and I think Sergio alluded to it earlier in his opening remarks. Our work could not succeed without the organization of funders that have come together to really further the policy goals, the principles, and the values that we've espoused as a network. PolicyLink has had the honor for the past 10 years or so of supporting the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, a network of over 200 organizations actively working to further policy and systems change and transform systems that are failing boys and men of color, their families, and communities. Since our founding in 2011, we've advanced over 100 policies which have been signed into law, and our work has really centered on state-level policy change and really being a lift to families, communities, directly impacted people who are seeking policy change at the state level, who have a direct relationship with boys and men of color or are boys and men of color themselves, seeking to drive change in places that they have traditionally been locked out of. So our effort is a power building effort. It is a effort that is based on the lived experience of people who are the most vulnerable, who are the most marginalized and excluded. And it is one that is also about radical solidarity. We believe that the struggle of boys and men of color is one that is tied to people of color more broadly, and every identity that you can kind of encapsulate within that broad spectrum. So whether you're talking about girls or women of color or trans and gender nonconforming people, those individuals are allies, partners, leaders within our network as well. And so we're excited to share some of what we've been up to. And in this conversation, you'll learn a little bit more about us and how we organize our work. One of the things that I'll say, and it's attached in one of the materials that you have received from Sergio, is that we have framed our work and our tent, if you will, under a series of rights that are encapsulated within the People's Platform. And the People's Platform acts as a unifying framework for our members and partners to operate from as we think of and develop and advance policy campaigns. We developed the People's Platform as a way to provide some structure, as a way to really explicitly articulate values and beliefs that were core to our work, and to ensure that all of the people who were involved and who were part of the Alliance were politically aligned. And so that is our guiding framework, and it's really based on a life course analysis and perspective, thinking about the multitude of issues impacting boys and men of color, their families and communities, and all the different system change efforts that are needed in order to transform outcomes and really broaden possibilities and opportunities. So that's the Alliance. We're active in California primarily, but recently, as of last year, expanded to Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. So there's a lot going on, different campaigns underway in all those places. Most recently launched a campaign in Texas with Alliance for Boys and Men of Color partners there around, really securing some justice for Tatiana Jefferson and the recent tragic killing there. And so we believe that there is a broad appetite for this work and are excited to share it with you as we move forward. I'm going to turn to David Turner and the Brothers Son Selves Coalition to just give a little bit of background on one of our most recent wins, and you can move to the next slide, Sergio. Recently, we've achieved a significant milestone in advancing SB 419 and securing that as an important protection for students around willful defiance. Willful defiance is an issue that we've been working on since the inception of the Alliance in 2011, and we have finally hit what we consider to be a major milestone. I'm going to turn it to David to talk more about that and what that means. But the Brothers Son Selves Coalition is the local affiliate of the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color in LA. And we consider their work at the local level to be an extension of our work at the state level. And so the success that they've had in LA with Every Student Succeeds, Every Student Matters, is part of the set of movement building activities which really catapulted us at the state level to be in this position to have won this important protection. So without any further ado, David, I'm going to turn to you and pop back in just a moment.
Cool. Okay, so so what's going on, people? Again, my name is David Turner. I'm currently the manager of the Brothers Son Selves Coalition. Again, I'm joined by Miguel Dominguez, who is the director of youth programs here at Community Coalition. One of our young people, Joaquin, who just joined us. What's up, Joaquin? He's one of our youth justice fellows. And we have Johnny Rodriguez from Kamai Girls in Action. So I'll start by painting a little context for what happened here locally and how that helped to elevate the statewide work. And then I'll turn it over to some of my coalition partners just to, just provide a little bit of some insights as to what the campaign meant for them and how through coalition, right, like it was able to support some of their work. So for those who don't know, the Brothers Son Selves Coalition started as an initiative between the California Endowment and Liberty Hill Foundation, initially founded to address the disproportionate rates of suspension, expulsion, and the hard school discipline that young men of color were facing in LA County schools, specifically Los Angeles Unified and Long Beach. And again, right, this is coalition helped to ignite a movement, right, to address the systems, right, that impact boys and men of color. So in 2011, 2012, to help paint a picture of what was going on in Los Angeles, there were over 26,000 school suspensions that year. Of those 26,000, 8,323 of those suspensions were for defiance. So nearly 1 in 3 suspensions in LAUSD were for the defiance disruption suspensions in that time frame, right? So one of the things that the young people did during that time was put together a school climate bill of rights, right? The school climate bill of rights, which was won in May of 2013, provided a set of rights for young people, that young people had the right to restoration, that young people had the right to stay in school, and more specifically, it effectively ended willful defiance for grades K through 12 in LAUSD. being the second largest school district in the country. So with that being said, that helped to provide a lot of momentum, along with other wins right across the state and other districts, such as San Francisco, Oakland, et cetera, for the passing of state legislation. So in 2014, Assembly Bill 420 was passed. Assembly Bill 420 is the first version of the bill to end willful defiance at the state level. That ended willful defiance for grades K through 3. And that bill had, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, that bill had a sunset. So there was additional advocacy, right, to try and ensure that we can get K through 12 passed at the state level. So there was a second iteration of the bill to try to get all the grades K through 12, which was Senate Bill 607. We gained a lot of momentum with that particular bill. However, there was, we had gotten some pushback specifically from the governor's office and some folks in the education lobby, right? So these would be the teachers unions, et cetera. With that being said, the bill that year was vetoed. We came back for the third time around this year with a semi-successful attempt. We were able to pass Senate Bill 419 this year, this September. Senate Bill 419 ended willful defiance school suspensions for grades K through 5 permanently and grades 6 through 8 with a 5-year sunset. So through the organizing of the coalition that we had to end willful defiance school suspension, in addition to the work of the BSS coalition, we were able to end willful defiance now for grades K through 8 across the state of California. So definitely an exciting victory. There is still much more work to do in terms of ensuring that grades 9 through 12 are protected. But even though, right, like we still have that work to do, this is going to provide a lot of momentum to be able to further implement this at the local level, not only across LA County, but in other parts of the state of California. So with that being said, that's generally the work of the campaign, specifically with the role of the Brother Son Selves Coalition. I'll talk a little bit about this and I'll turn it over to my partners if they want to chime in a little bit. But the BSS Coalition helped to play a key role, not only being able to mobilize young people, right, to go to speak at the Capitol, to go to talk to elected officials, but also because of our reach. Since we are a countywide coalition, we were able to meet with different elected officials. We had constituents in those particular areas, right? To give you an example, we were able to schedule a meeting through our relationship with My Girls in Action with Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell, who we've had some challenges with. However, we were able to get a meeting with him, right? So because of that and because of our reach, right, like we were able to not only get meetings and to really advocate for the bill, but we were also able to ensure that we can take the momentum of the local victories and then use that to push the state. So there were several school districts locally here in LA County who supported it, including Los Angeles Unified School District, who passed the resolution in support of the bill. And again, right, like through the organizing of the BSS Coalition, we were really able to gain momentum here locally in Southern California, right, in support of it. There's still, again, like I said, work to be done, but that's a little bit more context as to our role. And I'll turn it over to our partners. Johnny, if there's anything you'd like to add, please feel free to add. And Miguel, if there's anything you'd like to add, please feel free to add.
Johnny and Miguel, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I mean, David pretty much covered it. Yeah, I can't think of anything else to add. I mean, he said that pretty well.
Well,
Yeah, I think David pretty much covered it, but the only thing I would add is this was like an effort throughout the county or like across the state, but Long Beach particularly was really challenging, even though what's his name is the head of the education committee, is from Long Beach. O'Donnell, that's his name. Was really resistant to this bill. So that was a main challenge. It was kind of disappointing for us in Long Beach because he does come from Long Beach and used to be really active in politics here, so we can still see his sort of legacy in LBUSD still. That's all I'll add.
Yeah, and if I could just follow up and reiterate some of what Johnny just said, because it's probably a little difficult for folks to hear you, Johnny, and also outline a couple of other points about the relationship and how some of this work actually happens. You know, Mr. O'Donnell was the biggest barrier in the legislature to us passing a bill that would have protected students from all grades against willful defiance suspensions. And because he's the chair of the education committee in the assembly, and because he holds significant influence over education issues as a teacher and as someone who has very close relationships with teachers associations and unions, he was able to influence our bill in a way that was quite challenging. One of the
Mark, you're muted for me.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. For some reason, presentation quit and then muted me, but I'm back. One of the things that was a challenge for us and ultimately required us to really draw on the full breadth of our network was the opposition of Mr. O'Donnell. And what we were able to do by virtue of our partnership and the relationship with Brothers Themselves was engage in a more direct way with people from his district who were able to meet with him, push him, and advocate for a bill that would protect all students. Now, ultimately, we weren't successful, but the ability that Brothers Themselves provided us with to be able to not only go to his front door, his district office, and also then come up to the Capitol and testify and offer remarks about why it was important to have a bill that focused on all grades was really important. And that can't happen without the kind of integrated support that is furthering both the local work and the on-the-ground mobilization, as well as the state policy work. And so we work hand in hand to be able to further the same message, but in different spaces and with different messengers in a variety of different places. And so I just wanted to highlight that because I think it was a really important point, and I didn't want it to be lost. I'm going to move on because there's a lot of other content to cover. And I'm hoping that we can come back to questions at the end of the presentation. So please reserve your questions and we'll come back to them as we wrap up. In addition to SB 419, there were other wins that were really important that I think are worth highlighting here. One is AB 392, and for those who aren't aware, AB 392 was led by the Let Us Live Coalition, which included the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, but it was led by directly impacted families and grassroots organizers. And we have Smith and Kat Brooks to share a little bit about that campaign and what that bill accomplished. So I'm going to turn it over to them to provide some background on their efforts to further AB 892, and then I'll come back in and facilitate the next segment.
So I can start. My name is Kat Brooks. I'm the Executive Director of the Justice Teams Network and the co-founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project. And what AB 392 did was to change the use of force policy for California law enforcement for the first time in over 100 years. One of the things I think it's really important to highlight is that as progressive as California thinks that it is, California law enforcement agencies kill more people per capita than any other state in the country. And alongside of that, they have more protections through our Peace Officers Bill of Rights than any other state in the country. And so those two things have made California really a killing ground for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, men, women, and folks in the LGBTQIA community. And so what AB 392 does is forces law enforcement to utilize every existing alternative possible before using lethal force, and creates a paradigm within which they are going to have to justify utilizing use of force. So no longer does the excuse, I feared for my life because they were reaching for their driver's license or their phone, or they happened to blow their nose, or whatever other excuse was given for the homicide pertaining to people in our community. That will no longer be relevant or possible. And so what's happening now is that local law enforcement agencies across the country are scurrying to come figure out what their new use of force policy is going to be, because the law goes into effect in January 2020. I think the other thing that's important to note about 392 is that it came along with SB 230. And this part is where we're still trying to figure it out and where a lot of the organizing is going to happen, because SB 230 will mean that the use of force policies have to be standardized across the country. That said, I think what we're looking forward to now is a year of legal wrangling that unfortunately will come at the expense of more Black and Brown and Indigenous lives, as we figure out exactly what the policy is, what it means, what are the legal challenges, and try to anticipate the ways in which law enforcement is going to push back. But separate from the legislative victory the year before, SB 1421, I'm excited about the work that we're doing in preparation for the pushback for law enforcement. And so we're already organizing to support communities and figuring out what does 392 implementation look like, what are some of the legal pushbacks that they could have, so that we're not caught off guard, but we can be visionary instead of reactionary, ensuring that the strongest version of this bill is implemented in municipalities across the state. One of the things that was beautiful, there are lots of beautiful things, but one thing that was incredibly beautiful about this particular effort is the amazing role that directly impacted families, and by directly impacted, I mean people that have lost loved ones at the hands of state violence, played in achieving this victory. So I'll turn it over to Teresa Smith to talk about LEAN and the Stop Coalition and their efforts, and her effort as a mother who lost her own son. Teresa, are you there? You might be on mute, love.
Sergio, can you unmute her?
Yeah, she was on video. I don't think she's on anymore. I don't see it. Yeah, because she was joining us on video when I unmuted her then. I don't see her.
She's right there.
Does she come back?
Teresa?
Teresa.
I mean, I don't want to speak for impacted families. I can talk a little bit about it, and hopefully if she comes back, she can tell her own story, which is one of the big principles that we carried throughout this work, is that we wanted impacted family members to be able to tell their own stories. Teresa Smith, if you don't know, her son, Cesar, was murdered by the Anaheim Police Department in 2009. And sparked off some pretty major protests there, and led to her founding the Law Enforcement Accountability Network. The Stop Coalition is a coalition of literally hundreds of families, primarily located in Kern County, but with solidarity and allies across the state. And the role that they played was influencing the language of the bill, pushing back on advocates as advocates tried to maybe make some concessions in order to get the bill passed. They told their stories to legislator after legislator. And what's important about that, like we say that sometimes in conversation and we just blow it off like, great, they came and told their stories. But what folks need to understand is that every single time that one of our community members comes and tells their story, they are reliving that trauma, right? And these family members relived their trauma over and over and over again for 2 years in the name of ensuring that this never happens again to another family. I've been working with impacted families for well over a decade, and that is the wish of every impacted family member I've ever met, is that no other family ever has to go through the pain and the trauma of what they've experienced. And so for that reason, they talked to legislators, they held rallies, they held marches, they participated in conference calls, they helped shape bill language, they participated in mobilization calls, they helped plan organizing strategy. They were really, really at the forefront of getting this legislation passed, holding us as advocates accountable, and I believe are really what shifted the hearts and minds of legislators. I mean, it's one thing for Cat Brooks to go up and scream and rally and pontificate around inequity in law enforcement. It's completely another thing for Teresa Smith to come talk about her son Cesar Cruz, or the Dueñases to talk about Ernesto, or the Tyndalls to talk about their son Shalim, or I mean, I could go on. And we saw it visibly have an impact on legislators. And then at the end, the police lobby, of course, pushed back really hard. At the end, Governor Gavin Newsom stepped in to ensure that the bill got passed, which is a testament to anybody that's on this call and anybody in the state of the work we've done specifically around the last 10 years here in California on shifting the conversation about police accountability, reform, and even pushing the lever a little towards abolition. And I really believe that's because of the work that we've been doing over the last decade, that the country is having a different conversation about what public safety means, what law enforcement accountability looks like. And we see now that there are cities across the country that they're either coming to the family members, or they're coming to Policy Link, or they're coming to my organization or other organizations that were involved in the passing of legislation saying, how did you do this? We want to do this here as well. And to me, that's an even bigger victory if this can catch fire across the state, and will result, I believe, literally in the saving of thousands of lives. So I think that's enough, and I'll leave that there unless there are specific questions.
Did we get Teresa back?
Yeah, she's on. She can hear. She could hear Kat, but for some reason she's not able to speak herself. So she's going to try calling back in. So I think, Mark, if you want to, we'll just come back to her when she's able to join with audio.
Okay, great. So I'll just say a little bit about the anatomy of the campaign. And you heard Kat talk about different elements and components. What we have tried to do, Policy Link supports the Alliance, and the Alliance is also comprised of some of these same organizations that are a part of the Let Us Live campaign and under these different configurations like the Stop Coalition, Justice Teams Network, et cetera. And as an intermediary, as an advocacy organization, we have done a lot of work to ensure that we are always following the leadership of the organizations on the ground and directly impacted people and their families. And so we have tried to orchestrate campaign support in ways that really boost and lift up and augment and catalyze the capacity that those leaders have to be able to drive the change that they want. So we did a lot to support things like mobilization and organizing of families in directly impacted communities. We supported convenings, we supported rallies. We did a host of things that allowed them to come together, to build strategy, and to amplify their voices. If you go to the next slide, you'll also see some of the communications materials that we put together. We had a very troubling set of legislators in the Capitol who we had to influence and move, and some in more pointed ways. And what we did in order to get their attention and to force the issue and force the question about whether they supported police accountability was take out a series of ads. And those ads were in papers in their districts that really targeted them in very visible ways with their photos front and center. And, you know, putting the stories of directly impacted families at the forefront in those ads, and even in other instances doing op-eds with directly impacted family members and leaders, articulating their stories in full and demanding accountability. So these are just some of the activities that we undertook from a communications perspective. But then we also supported the mobilization of calls and district lobby visits and pressure, both in the Capitol and on the ground, to really ensure that people were contacting legislators and making sure legislators knew what they wanted, and not succumbing to the pressure of the police lobby. So, you know, we did call programs targeting several districts that were the most troublesome, and ensuring that residents in those districts were calling their legislators, asking them to vote in support. We did district lobby visits, we did Sacramento visits, and just to be clear, you have to do, you can't just go to Sacramento once and do a round of lobby visits and expect there to be a change in a legislator's perspective or attitude. I'm talking about numerous visits per week, every week of the session, to ensure that they were always wrestling with the question of whether they were going to support police accountability and stop police murder. And having to contend with those questions on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, was absolutely critical to our effort. Again, you know, the public pressure, the op-eds, and the media attention was also critical. And you can see on this slide just some of the examples of how we drew attention to legislators on social media and in print publications, to kind of give you a flavor for how we orchestrated these efforts. If you can move to the next slide, I'll just pause here to see if Teresa is able to get back on. No? Okay. Well, we'll loop her in when she joins, but just to keep things moving, I just want to also say that, you know, we won we won one other important bill this past year, and it wasn't one that the partners on the phone can speak to, but I just want to share it because I think it's one that people recognize and that people may not necessarily see as being a you know, BMOC bill or something that the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color supported, but it is definitely something that grabbed national attention. And that was the bill focused on the Fair Pay-to-Play Act. It's a bill that essentially creates a path for student athletes to be able to be paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness. We were immediately drawn to this bill as an opportunity to further the economic rights of student athletes, primarily because so many student athletes are boys and men of color. But we also recognize that, you know, there was a broader economic equity, civil rights issue at play, in that this class of student was the only student deprived of the opportunity to really make any money from the use of their talents and abilities. Every other student, every other person on a college campus can do that, with the exception of student athletes, because of the way that the NCAA functions. They're a monopoly. They are really operating in a way that's focused on the exploitation of students and students of color and low-income students particularly. So as a matter of justice, we were very concerned with this issue and took action, and were able to engage and support millions of student athletes who are impacted by this issue. For our purposes and our work, you know, a lot of what we did was a lot of campaign research and media engagement. We also worked to try and support the ability for students to testify. Many of those young people were people who had been injured and who really lost the ability to engage in any type of professional sports beyond college by virtue of their collegiate injury. And so when you look at the data and the circumstances surrounding those issues, it was really important for us to be involved in that space. And so sometimes there are opportunities like that come up in the Capitol where we engage, and we try to work and build constituency around those. And then there are other times, like in these other instances, where there is already a solid constituency, and we are operating from that base. I see Teresa is on, and so I am going to see if we can turn to her to offer some remarks regarding her experience in leading AB 392's Let Us Live coalition and campaign. Teresa, can you hear us? Can you hear me? I am. We cannot hear you, but I'm hoping that, oh, there we go.
Here you go. Can you hear us, Teresa?
She may be muted on her line.
You might want to check if you're muted on your line.
Hey, if you're muted on your line, you might have to hit *6 to unmute.
Thanks, David.
She looks frozen.
Yeah, looks frozen to me too.
I am trying to unmute.
There you are.
Can you guys hear me?
We hear you. We hear you.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I can't hear you because I'm outside. I'm sorry. I'm in Palm Springs right now, and I'm trying to check out, and I'm trying to fix this up. So I can't hear you guys, but hopefully you can hear me. So we were talking about the AB 392 and what families went through.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my take on this is, you know, we pushed really hard for this bill. We're tired of law enforcement killing our loved ones. My son was killed December 11th, 2009. He was shot 15 times in the back while he was still strapped in a seatbelt. Wasn't even committing a crime. But, you know, this isn't the only story. There's so many other stories. You know, so many families have lost their loved ones, not even to just being shot, but also to being choked. They go into a coma and then they die. So there's been you know, this is what we were fighting so hard for, is that they change. Like Kat said earlier, you know, they just kill us if they're killing people if they just move. If they're killing them for no reason, you know, for a pack of cigarettes or for a little child who's 12 years old who's got a toy gun. And the last 4 people killed in Anaheim were mentally ill. So fighting for this bill, a lot of families came together because, like I said, we're tired of them killing us. A lot of them are, you know, single parents that had to go up to the Capitol. I mean, we did a lot of phone calls, you know, we went to a lot of legislators, you know, we took the bus several times up there. So this was not only just the time and effort that we put into it, but it becomes emotionally draining for us because we have to constantly repeat our stories about what happened. So it's draining emotionally, financially, physically, in every way. But we do it because we know that this is important. We need them to stop killing our loved ones. Thank you for the opportunity of letting me say a few things. There's a lot more I could say, but I know that there's a lot to be said on this call. And because my reception is so bad, I'm going to have to get off, unfortunately. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Kat. Thank you to all of you. But I'm especially thanking Kat and Mark because they have been supporters for the families like you would not believe. They are such awesome people. So I have a lot of respect for both of you. Thank you so much. Like I said, I'd like to stay on longer, but my connection is so bad that I'm going to have to get off. But anyway, thank you all and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Teresa. We love you.
I love you too.
Thank you. Thank you. Love you. All right. Travel safe.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye. One additional point that I'd like to bring up regarding AB 392 and just, another expression of gratitude for Teresa and the families for the courage and the sacrifice that they demonstrated throughout this campaign. It was really tremendous. But one thing that the story about AB 392 doesn't often encapsulate, but I think is really important, is that there was another bill, SB 230, which I think was briefly mentioned, which was being advanced by the police lobby and essentially authored by Senator Caballero. And that bill was originally intended to subvert AB 392. And through the advocacy of the directly impacted families and community organizations and everyone in the Let Us Live Coalition, that bill was set up in a way that now allows it to hopefully complement what 392 ultimately became and advanced. So AB 392 sets the policy framework for use of force, and SB 230 now mandates that training conform to that policy standard and that framework, so that if law enforcement is operating from a necessary standard and have to exhaust all other avenues before using lethal force, then the training then reflects that. And so, that I think was a huge win to be able to right size SB 230 and make it complementary. And now we have a necessary standard, and we have in SB 230 requirements for law enforcement to have policies at the local level that reinforce what AB 392 is about, and training at the state level that reinforces AB 392. So more is needed in order to ensure all those things sync up the way I just articulated them, but I think it's a really important thing for people to not lose sight of, is that we not only had to advocate for what we wanted in AB 392, we also had to beat back bad legislation and make sure that it actually supported what we were trying to further. So, Kat, is there anything you want to add to that? Because I think that's an important point.
Yeah, just really, really quickly, because I think it's always important to explicitly call out the power of organizing, because I feel like it's still a craft not fully understood or appreciated by folks. But this was really the power of organizing, and the California Police Association lobby is one of the most powerful lobbies in the nation, and they have a stronghold in Sacramento. And so the fact that we were able to get this bill passed in the face of how strong their lobby is really a testament to the families, as we talked about, but also the power of organizing and the Let Us Live Coalition, which are primarily grassroots organizations that are steeped in training organizers and utilizing organizing as a way to build power and shift power and win. And so I just think that that's always important to call out that, you know, organizing was one of the main pillars of this campaign that got the win.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to organizers, California now has the strongest use of force policy in the country, and the only state that combines the necessary standard with some accountability in terms of looking at all of the officers' actions leading up to the use of lethal force. So moving quickly back to the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color and the Policy Summit. So every year we host a policy summit that really is the breeding ground for the campaigns that people want to pursue. This is a space that really allows for on-the-ground leaders, organizers in particular, to articulate the types of campaigns that they want to advance and to be joined and supported by advocates and other key stakeholders. And so this year, our policy summit is going to be on December 4th in LA. Last year was in Oakland. And, you know, they really are unique opportunities for people to get a look at all of the different things that are happening outside of their one campaign, and to be able to find ways to partner with people who they can incorporate into their respective efforts. And so we're looking forward to this upcoming summit. And, you know, what often happens is, you know, for bills that aren't successfully advanced in one year, they carry over into the next year. They're what we call two-year bills. And so those bills are also featured. And this past year, we had two-year bills. One of them, AB 901, which was led by Youth Justice Coalition and ACLU of California and a host of others, which seeks to decriminalize truancy and end voluntary probation. So we'll be discussing that at the Policy Summit. And then we'll also likely have some brief conversation, although it might not be featured, about one bill, AB 656, the Office of Healthy and Safe Communities, which seeks to create a violence prevention strategy in the state of California that is implemented out of the Department of Public Health. California, for all of the violence that takes place in the state, does not have a unified violence prevention strategy or plan for implementation. And that bill seeks to create that and further that conversation at the state level in ways that invest in community-based solutions and alternatives to punishment for violence of all forms. And so those are just some of the things that happen at the Policy Summit. We're excited to roll out new campaigns in that space, really interested in getting input from people to refine those campaigns. And so that's one of the things that we do on an annual basis in order to ensure that our network is actively shaping the policy direction of work that they want to realize in the coming year. Next slide, please. So is this the next slide, Sergio? Sorry. Okay. So this is the that's all folks slide. I guess that's the, so just in conclusion, I want to say a couple things about what we're hoping to be able to further in 2020. Kat mentioned a desire to continue on with AB 392 implementation, and so there are lots of bills that are going to be that are going to have an implementation element to them. Also, the same is true with SB 419, which David mentioned earlier, and secondarily, you know, we also have a series of other policies that we are going to be kicking off, or policy campaigns that we're going to be kicking off looking at things like alternatives to policing and really investing in first responders from community-based organizations and community-level first responders, people who can be engaged in terms of supporting emergencies and crises. We are looking at opportunities to further dialogue around community schools. We are looking at the possibility of advancing a Raise the Age campaign. Many of you may or may not be familiar with probation's interest in furthering conversations around Raise the Age. For many grassroots organizations who have been involved in youth justice for quite a while, this is a topic that has predated probation's interest, and so really crystallizing what those organizations want and want to advance is an important piece for us. And many, many more issues will be discussed in that space. And so we're excited about the opportunity to embark on that work with our partners, and look forward to having a conversation with you about any things that you've heard here today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Sergio, and we can get into questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Teresa, for sharing. Thank you, David, for sharing the work. Very valuable. We appreciate all that you have done in this space. So yeah, I think at this point we'd love to open it up for questions. I'm not sure we received any questions on our end through the chat, so we'll just go ahead and open that up. If folks have a question, go ahead and ask that question, and then we'll go ahead and let Mark or Kat or other folks answer those questions directly. So hearing none right now. Mark, I guess for me to set you again, so did folks have a question? Was someone trying to ask a question? Sorry about that. Okay, so Mark, I guess question from our end, you mentioned the partnership with the California Foundation for Boys and Men of Color. Given that we're kind of gearing this conversation or this webinar to funders, how do you see foundations being able to play a role in supporting the work of the Alliance? Again, we know there's a resource end of it, but outside of resources, how else can foundations be supportive of this work?
So, great question. Thank you, Sergio. I think there are a number of different opportunities. We've relied on, as you mentioned, resources are definitely one piece, but I think there are bigger ways in which some of the foundations can contribute. I think that we don't do enough to leverage the relationship capital that foundations offer, especially the CEOs. These are powerful leaders who have an immense amount of influence, specifically with lawmakers. And, those relationships can open doors. They can open doors for families. They can open doors for directly employed people. They can open doors for us advocates even to be able to have conversation about what we want. And so I would love to see more leveraging of relationships so that we can be able to more intentionally influence people the way that we need to. In addition to that, I think there's also, I think there are a set of assets that foundations have that aren't often deployed, but can be useful. So whether it's staff or whether it's consultants or whether it's facilities, You know, these are things that we can make good use of in our campaigns. We often convening. We often are in need of smart people to help us with problems. We're often in need of really talent to move tasks forward. And so to the extent that any of those things exist, or there is a unique set of assets that a certain institution might have, you know, we can find a way to leverage it. You know, so I think those types of things are really help to us as we think about the spate of things that we need to further our campaigns.
Great. And Mark, so I agree with that 100%. That's kind of the work that we've been trying to do with our network and our CEOs that are part of our work, is to figure out ways to better align the influence that they bring to the table with the work that's happening on the policy front with the Alliance. And so again, I don't know if there are any other questions. I'd want to make sure that before we do that, if folks don't have questions now but want to reach out to Mark, can you give us your contact information and make sure that folks can jot that down if they have any questions around the Alliance. Then I'll follow up with my contact information of ways that they can get involved with the California Foundation for Boys and Men of Color if they want to be connected in that way as well.
Absolutely. The best way to reach me is either via email, which is mark, M-A-R-C, @policylink.org. That's mark@policylink.org. Or via phone. I give everybody my cell phone number, so it's no secret. 510-220-3999. 510-220-3999. You can reach me directly there.
Great. And then as you see, Sybil Grant also put Mark's email on the chat function. I'll put in mine as well, but mine is squayar, and that's CUELLAR @sierrahealth.org. And again, I can be reached, again, if you want to be in contact with Mark, I can patch you all in on that. But also if you want to learn more about the California Foundation for Boys and Men of Color and the work that we have going on across the state, definitely can answer questions to that. But not sure if there are any other questions for Mark. If there are, go ahead and I'll kind of be quiet for the next minute to see if there's any questions. And if not, then we'll go ahead and close out. All right, so hearing none, Mark, again, thank you for doing the work that you all are doing with the Alliance. Very critical work for Boys and Men of Color, and then really for California and all marginalized communities that are impacted in California. Also, thanks to Kat, to David Turner, to Teresa for your stories and the work that you all have been doing in alignment with Mark and the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. It's greatly appreciated. And again, we wish you all the best in the rest of 2019 and into 2020. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today and learning about these efforts that Mark and the team have been working on. And again, we hope that you all can also figure out ways to be supportive of this work and also support the work that is needed to kind of shift policies and systems in California to better for opportunities for boys and men of color, but for all Californians in the state. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. We will be, again, sending out the recording of this webinar as well as the materials that were sent over this morning for folks if they want to be sharing this webinar with others and the work that Mark's doing as well. So thank you all.
Thank you, Sergio. Appreciate your leadership, man.
Thank you, Mark.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.